Hello, thank you for watching this video tutorial from RBA Supplies. In this video tutorial we're going to talk about XC116, XC132, and READYxWICK. We're going to talk about some of the safety concerns and aspects of READYxWICK and some of the safety concerns and aspects of XC116 and XC132. To start off with, we're going to show how to tell the difference between properly treated material from RBA Supplies, which is known as READYxWICK, and READYxWICK Slim. The READYxWICK product is the 3mm version, and the READYxWICK Slim is its smaller brother, the 2mm product. The equivalent would be XC116 and XC132. But here's why it's important that you know the difference between XC132 and XC116 and READYxWICK. READYxWICK is the only product right now that's being properly treated on the market today. That's very important for your health to keep that in mind. And we'll show you kind of how to tell the difference and also why that's important for your health. The easiest way to tell the difference of whether it's been properly treated, like it has with RBA Supplies, or undertreated or not treated at all from other guys. One of the easiest ways is to use what we call a cut test. And what the cut test or cut method does is very simply you cut the material and see what happens. In properly treated RBA Supplies READYxWICK, you wouldn't get a mushroom. You wouldn't. This material wouldn't fray out like you can see here in the picture. This particular material is untreated XC132. So if we cut this material, you'll notice as soon as we cut it, and we're just going to pick, just a piece here in this. Obviously this is nicely woven. It's nice and tight until we cut it. When we cut it, you see what happened there? It automatically just kind of sprung. Sprung out, sprung open. And again, all we did was cut the material. As soon as we cut that material, that sort of springs out or mushrooms out from doing nothing more than just using a sharp pair of clippers and cutting that material. It just mushrooms out. We'll go ahead and put these off to the side. Next we'll show you what it looks like when you cut properly treated material from RBA Supplies. This is READYxWICK from RBA Supplies using the same cut test that we just used before. So when we cut the material, you notice it doesn't fray. It stays nice and clean. It's got a nice clean cut edge. Again, we cut the material. Oops, we didn't cut it all the way. Okay, so we cut the material. Again, you have a nice clean edge. Again, nice clean edge. In fact, the material from RBA Supplies is treated so well that you can even cut it at an angle, for example, a 45-degree angle. And when you cut it, you see how it kept that angle, it kept that sort of sharp angle point? Even the piece that we cut, you can see, let me go ahead and move these around over here. Even the piece that we cut, you can see it still has an angle on it. And that's just a tiny little, about a 1/4 inch piece. So that's the difference between properly treated material, properly treated material from RBA Supplies. In fact, you know what? Let's do this. We'll make one happy and we'll make one, well, it's just sort of naturally sad, I think. There's our happy face. Maybe we'll give him a little tongue here. So there we go. There is properly treated READYxWICK from RBA Supplies versus the untreated material of what they call XC132 in this size from the other guys. Let's go ahead and show you the same thing, but in the larger size. Okay. Again, this is untreated XC116. When we do the cut test, you'll see that it just explodes out. Again, we'll cut it. It literally just disintegrates. Okay. Let's go ahead and move that out of the way. And now we'll show you a properly treated piece of READYxWICK from RBA Supplies. We're going to just do the cut test. Okay. All right. Again, it cuts very cleanly. Here's those pieces, that it cut off. Where'd the other piece go? Here we go. These pieces are holding together quite well. So again, this is properly treated material from RBA Supplies. This is otherwise known as READYxWICK, is right here. This material, READYxWICK. This is READYxWICK, properly cut. You can see the edges are nice and clean. And then this big mess up in front of it, this stuff here is not treated or undertreated XC116 or Nextel 312 that some of the other guys are trying to sell you. Personally, I would make sure that I'm vaping with RBA Supplies READYxWICK. Now why? Why would I make sure that I'm vaping RBA Supplies READYxWICK versus this other material from the other guys? The answer is very simple. We appreciate your health. We appreciate our health. We ourselves vape this material, or vape with this material rather. I got into this, into this business because I myself am a vapor, and I wanted to vape with the safest product available that I could get my hands on. And this was the material that I came up with. Properly treated, this material is about as safe as it can get. Now, of course, in the vaping world, we can't use that word safe, because truly nothing that we inhale in our lungs, nothing that we use for vaping, truly is considered to be safe. It's a sort of a taboo word in the vaping world. However, what we can do is make sure that we do everything that we can do to provide the safest possible product for you to use. And that's what we do at RBA Supplies. We properly treat this material so that it is safest for you to use for your vaping needs. So what does that mean, treat this material? The manufacturer recommends treating this material at heat temperatures which exceed certain temperatures and certain times, so that it can bake out the chemicals and the things that are in it, so that it becomes, so that those chemicals aren't in the material any longer. So their recommended temperatures and times for doing that is 1650 degrees for over 12 hours. Actually, they say specifically for 12 plus hours at 1650 degrees Fahrenheit. At RBA Supplies, we feel that it's always better to go above and beyond the recommended requirements, because it costs a little more, frankly, to do it that way. It costs a little more to do it right. But really, what is the cost of creating the most safe product available on the internet for the vaping industry? There is no cost that's too great for that. So we do take that extra effort, and we do make that extra, or rather, we do take the extra effort to properly treat it above and beyond what the manufacturer recommends. We actually treat our material at over 1800 degrees for much more than 12 hours. We actually treat it for closer to 20, to some cases 24 hours. Our treatment schedule is proprietary because we've spent quite a few hours and frankly thousands of feet getting it right. We wanted to make sure that we were creating the safest possible product available for you to use, and we wanted to make sure that we were doing it right. So when we treat this material, we are heat treating it in a digital kiln that treats it exactly the same way every time. It treats it for over 18 hours. And it treats it for over 1800 degrees. That's pretty significant. Okay, so the minimum recommended requirement from the manufacturer is 1650 degrees for 12 hours. We exceed that by more than 6 hours, and we exceed the temperature by more than 250 degrees. So what does that mean? What are the results of that? Well, we have had this material tested by an independent lab in what they call an off-gas testing. And what that means in English is that they take the material before it's been processed and they test to see how many chemicals are in it. And then they take the material after it's been processed and see how many chemicals are left. Through our process, and this is actually our old process, we actually treat it even more intensely now, but through our old process, we were eliminating 96 to 98% of the chemical bond that was in the material. Now, realistically, you're never going to get to 100% because part of those chemicals, some of those things, are what give it the properties that allow it to withstand the heat temperatures that that we're able to withstand with this material, and frankly, that we need for the vaping industry. But 96 to 98% of those are removed through our treatment process. It's because we treat it quite vigorously. Even more so now. In fact, we're going to order a new off-gas testing here in the next coming month or so, because we want to have it tested again, because we're even testing it, or we're even treating it rather even more aggressively now. So we feel that our percentage reduction is probably going to be, instead of from 96 to 98%, we're aiming and hoping that our reduction is from 98 to 99% reduction, which is fantastic. The other guys simply aren't doing that. They're either not treating it at all or they're under treating it because they kind of figure that, well, hey, maybe that's good enough. Well, here at RBA Supplies, when it comes to your health and my health, when it comes to the public's health, good enough, frankly, is just not good enough. You know, at RBA Supplies, we use our materials ourselves. So we want to create the most safe material that we can possibly use for ourselves. And the community gets to benefit from that as well. It's important to us. That's why we started this company, was to be able to provide a product to the public that was the safest possible product to be able to use. Now, when we talk about safety, one of the things I want to mention is what does safety mean in READYxWICK versus some of the other materials that are available? Cotton, EcoWool, silica, maybe braided steel, wire mesh, things like that. One of the things that's great about READYxWICK is the amount of time that it lasts. But it's not quite what it sounds. It's not great because it lasts a long time. It's great because it's not breaking down. Okay? So you take cotton, for example. Cotton breaks down maybe after a day or 2 or 3 days, 4 days if you're really careful. Take silica. Silica breaks down after a couple days or a few days, maybe even a week if you're careful. EcoWool, you might get a little longer, longer use out of that. EcoWool might last a week or maybe 2 weeks before it breaks down. And what I mean by break down, I mean that those fibers become unusable. You know, the wick doesn't saturate anymore, or it gets burnt up, or it simply falls apart. So why is that important, and why does that make READYxWICK so great? READYxWICK, we've had users that have used the same wick, a single wick, for 150 days. Now, would we recommend you to use a wick for 150 days? Frankly, I don't think I personally would. I myself personally change my wicks out once a month. I choose to do that because those wicks are sitting in liquid and they're getting heated. My own personal comfort level is I really like to change the wick once a month at least. But the fact is, this wick can last for 150 days, in some cases even longer. So why is that important? Why is it important that that the READYxWICK is able to last so long versus the other materials that aren't? I mean, other than the simple fact that, hey, great, it lasts a long time, I don't have to change it out, and gosh, I get so much use out of a single wick, and I don't have to spend a lot of money on it in the long run. Why is it important that it lasts so long? It's because it's not breaking down. That's the important part, is that the wick, the material, isn't breaking down and isn't ending up in your lungs. Cotton, EcoWool, silica, even wire mesh to some degree, they all break down within, anywhere from 1 day to, maybe 2 weeks. READYxWICK can go 150 days. that material that isn't breaking down, guess where it's not ending up? It's not ending up in your lungs. The other guys, the other materials that are out there, cotton, silica, eco wool, the other, it's kind of the standard materials out there. When those break down, those end up in your lungs. And that's what makes READYxWICK so special, is because it doesn't break down like the other materials. That material that doesn't break down doesn't end up in your lungs. So now let's talk about some of the things that are questions and concerns about the products that have come up over time. There's two main ones. The one is the fact that we make the claim that the READYxWICK product doesn't fray like it would if it were untreated. Now, as we've illustrated here, I'll go ahead and move these out of the way. The untreated product for XC116 looks like this. And that's just from cutting it. The untreated product from XC132 looks like this when you cut it. The treated product, which is READYxWICK, for the same material as the XC116, only this has been properly treated by RBA Supplies, called READYxWICK, is right here. That's what happens when you cut it. Nice and clean. The treated product from RBA Supplies, called READYxWICK Slim, which is the 2mm version, is right here. Again, nice and flush, nice and smooth. Now, does that mean that it won't fray? Well, of course not. After all, it is just a fabric material. It's a woven material. It's not made of steel, so it certainly will fray if you abuse it. And, what does abuse mean? What we mean by abuse when it comes to this particular material, to READYxWICK, is let's say that you have a coil that you're trying to fit READYxWICK in and it just doesn't quite fit. So we'll take a coil here that's much too small for this product and we'll try to fit it in. If we try to shove this material into that wick, we really fuss with it and we really just kind of keep shoving it and moving it around, could we make this material fray out? Well, yeah. Of course we can. If we keep shoving it in here, of course we can make it kind of fray. Okay? It is, after all, just a woven material. It's a fabric material. So sure, you'll be able to get it to fray. You'll be able to force it to sort of open up, and the weave to come undone. But there is an enormous difference between this kind of fraying, which you would, obviously is as to be expected, as natural as you would think it would be, to the type of fraying that we are referring to that it will not do, which is this. I'll just put those side by side. I mean, you saw how much we fussed with this coil and this wick, where we were trying to just basically shove it into this coil, right? I mean, it's, we're not playing around here. We're really kind of messing with the end there, kind of forcing it in. You can see it, kind of mushrooming out or opening up. But even with all that messing around, you see the difference between this, which is RBA Supplies, and this, which is untreated or undertreated material. So that's what we mean by that RBA Supplies materials won't fray when you cut it. Will it fray when you abuse it? Well, sure, of course it will. Anything would. I mean, heck, if I were to go grab a steel bar and bang it against the ground, it's probably going to fray a little bit too. So this is, this stuff isn't made of steel. It's not fray proof. But when we refer to it not fraying, again, it's this crazy mushroom out when you just first cut the product. And we're referring to this fraying not because of the properties of having a nice clean wick. We're referring it not doing this to show that it's properly treated. In some cases, you might actually want to have the ends fray a little bit, with your READYxWICK, because it might help absorb some of the juice, or some of the users that they build certain builds, they like to have it fray out a little bit. So we're not saying that it won't. What we're saying is to tell the difference between untreated and treated material, you use the cut test, and if it mushrooms out immediately, if it frays out immediately, you certainly know that it's not treated material. One of the other main questions that we get is this white dust when you cut the material. Let me find my clippers here. I'll go ahead and make a couple of cuts just so you can see what I'm referring to. Okay, so you see this material here. This is the READYxWICK that we cut off from this main piece. And you see this white sort of speckled dust here that's on the table that's right next to it that came off when we cut it. So the question is, what is that white dust, and is it a risk? Is it dangerous to me? In the scientific community, they measure this dust by what they call a micron. The micron is really no more than a unit of measure for size, for small particles. Silica, for example, has a micron particle size of anywhere from 0.5 to 5. That's the size of the microns for silica. READYxWICK has a particle size of anywhere from 7 microns up to 13 microns. The majority of which micron size for READYxWICK is between 10 and 12 microns. The majority of micron size elements in silica are between 1 and 3 microns in size. So why is that important? What is all this talk about microns and size and dust and all that stuff? Where does that apply to me, and why is it important to know? The micron size in the scientific community is what they generally use to decipher whether or not that material or those particles are a danger or a health risk or not. Anything under 5 microns in size is considered, generally speaking, to be a health risk, because anything under 5 microns in size are able to pass into or to wedge into your skin, into your flesh, etc. They're small enough to get into the pores of your skin and into the creases or pores in your flesh. So this is why silica is such a dangerous product. Most of the micron sizes in silica are between 1 and 3 or 2 and 3 microns, which is well under the 5 micron size limit, which means that those particles are small enough to penetrate the flesh, both on the outside on your skin and inside through your respiratory system. This is why when people work with silica in a profession, they're required to wear masks which prevent those particles from going into their bodies, or at least help prevent it, because those particles are under 5 microns in size and pose a potential health risk. READYxWICK's particle sizes are anywhere from 7 to 13 microns in size, and the majority of which are between 10 and 12 microns. So what does that mean? Well, the minimum micron size for, generally speaking, in the scientific community to be a non-health risk is 5 microns, which means anything over 5 microns, generally speaking, again, by the scientific community, is decided that it's decided to be or stated to be that it does not seem to be a health risk. Anything over 5 microns is too large to penetrate into the flesh or into the skin. So READYxWICK coming in at between 7 and 13 microns in size, the majority of which are between 10 and 12 microns in size, are more than double the size required or needed for it not to be a health risk. Again, that magical number is 5 microns. But I can see it, some people will say. I can see the white dust here. Well, that's just it. It's actually a good thing that you can see the dust, because that means that it's large enough for you to see. That's why silica, for example, is so dangerous, is because when you cut it, believe it or not, those particles are still there when you cut silica. You just can't see them because they're so small, they're so fine. So the fact that you can see this white dust in READYxWICK when you cut it is actually a good thing, because it means that those particles are large enough to see. Now, the question naturally becomes, I mean, when I look at this, I think, well, gosh, I really don't want to vape that. I don't want to bring that into my lungs myself. I'm kind of nervous about that. And that's a completely understandable concern. I had the same concern when I first started as well, until I realized how long the product lasts. You know, a single wick of READYxWICK can last 150 days. So what does that mean? As I spoke earlier, it means that it's not breaking down. Well, if this dust was constantly getting into my lungs, you know, the material can't magically produce it. The material only has enough material to cover, you know, what it is. So if this kind of dust was routinely or constantly breaking down and breaking off and ending up into our lungs, there's physically no way that that wick would last that long. The fact that it does last that long tells us very clearly that these particles are staying in the wick. These particles that you see that happen when we cut them, when we sever those connections between the fibers, when we sever those connections, it's only those connections that get severed that are producing this dusty material. So what that means is that although we can see this dust, you know, it really isn't coming into our lungs, you know, the way that you might think it would. So again, just to recap, the fact that you can see this dust is actually a good thing because it is so large that we know that it's not going to penetrate our flesh. So thank you for the questions. If you have any other questions, please feel free to ask. I love addressing them. You know, this product is a product that I use myself. It's a product that I believe in, and I'm more than happy to answer any kind of questions that you may have, certainly related to you know, your safety concerns and the health, as well as uses and different ways that you can utilize our products. Thanks for watching this video tutorial. Again, this is RBA Supplies discussing some of the aspects and concerns and questions about READYxWICK and how to tell the differences between properly treated, untreated, and undertreated material. Thanks for watching and have a good day.